March 15th, 1944, 28,000 feet above Brunswick, Germany. The morning sun glinted off the canopy of Hauptmann Heinz Knoke's Focke-Wulf 198 as he positioned his squadron for another attack on the seemingly endless stream of American bombers. With 197 confirmed victories, Knoke was one of the Luftwaffe's most experienced fighter pilots, a veteran who had survived 3 years of combat on both the eastern and western fronts. But this morning, something was different, terrifyingly different. Climbing through the bomber formations came fighters unlike anything he had encountered before. Not the familiar Thunderbolts with their massive radial engines, not the twin-boomed Lightnings, but sleek, graceful aircraft that seemed to dance through the sky with impossible agility. Their liquid-cooled engines hummed smoothly as they accelerated toward his formation with speeds that made his blood run cold. "Achtung! New American fighters at 3 o'clock high," Knoke transmitted to his squadron. "Break formation and engage." What Knoke couldn't know was that he was witnessing the combat debut of a weapon that would systematically destroy the Luftwaffe's fighter arm. The North American P-51 Mustang, equipped with the British Rolls-Royce Merlin engine, had just entered European skies. And the most revolutionary aspect of this aircraft wasn't what American engineers had added, but what they had deliberately removed. In a design decision that would transform aerial warfare, American engineers had stripped away protective armor that conventional wisdom deemed essential. They had reduced the aircraft's weight by removing heavy steel plates, sacrificing pilot protection for something more valuable: speed, range, agility, the ability to hunt German fighters all the way to Berlin and back. The mathematics of survival were being rewritten at 440 miles per hour. The Germans believed protection came from thick armor. The Americans had discovered that the best protection was simply not being where the enemy shot. This philosophical revolution, born from engineering calculations and combat experience, would prove more deadly than any amount of steel plating. The Mustang that climbed toward Knoke's formation that March morning weighed just 7,125 pounds empty. A German Messerschmitt Bf 109 G6, Knoke's previous mount, weighed 5,893 pounds empty, but carried armor plates totaling 190 pounds, protecting the pilot, fuel tanks, and engine. The Mustang carried just 65 pounds of armor, focused exclusively on critical areas immediately behind the pilot. This weight difference of 125 pounds in armor alone translated directly into performance advantages that would prove decisive. For every pound of weight removed, the Mustang gained speed, climb rate, range, and maneuverability. The engineers at North American Aviation had performed a calculation that German designers couldn't accept. In fighter combat, the best armor is speed. The revolution began not in America, but in Britain. In April 1940, the British Purchasing Commission approached North American Aviation with an urgent request. Britain desperately needed fighters to replace Hurricane and Spitfire losses. Could North American build Curtiss P-40 Warhawks under license? James Howard Kindleberger, North American's president, made a counter-proposal that seemed audacious. "We can design and build you a better fighter in the same time frame." The British were skeptical. North American had never built a fighter aircraft. Their experience consisted of training planes and light bombers. Yet Kindleberger's chief designer, Edgar Schmude, a German immigrant who had worked for Fokker and Messerschmitt before fleeing Nazi Germany, believed he could create something revolutionary. The design philosophy Schmude adopted was radical for 1940. While European designers armored their fighters heavily, accepting weight penalties for protection, Schmude focused on aerodynamic efficiency and performance. He studied German design principles but rejected their conclusions. The Messerschmitt 109 succeeded not because of its armor, Schmude argued, but despite it. The prototype NA-73X, which would become the Mustang, first flew on October 26, 1940. just 117 days from contract to first flight, a record that stunned the aviation industry. Test pilot Vance Breese reported, "This aircraft is the finest I have ever flown. The performance is extraordinary." But there was a problem. The Allison V-1710 engine, while reliable, lost power dramatically above 15,000 feet. At the altitudes where bomber escorts operated, the Mustang was merely adequate. The British, desperate for any fighters, accepted them anyway, designating them Mustang Mark I. Initial combat reports from Royal Air Force squadrons were mixed. At low altitude, the Mustang was exceptional. Its speed and maneuverability surpassed Spitfires, but high-altitude performance disappointed. More critically, early models suffered catastrophic losses to ground fire. The minimal armor that Schmood had incorporated proved insufficient against German anti-aircraft weapons. Royal Air Force after-action reports from late 1941 documented the problem. Squadron leader Ian Gleed, commanding No. 609 Squadron, reported, "Mustangs are superb aircraft at low level, but vulnerable to ground fire. We have lost 7 aircraft to flak in 2 months. Armor inadequacies are killing pilots." This feedback reached North American Aviation in February 1942. The company faced a critical decision: add armor to protect pilots, accepting performance degradation, or maintain the aircraft's speed and agility while minimizing armor. Most aircraft manufacturers would have added protection. North American chose differently. Edgar Schmood assembled his engineering team to analyze combat loss data systematically. They discovered something unexpected. Most Mustangs lost to ground fire had been hit in the cooling system, not the cockpit. The liquid-cooled Allison engine required radiators, coolant lines, and heat exchangers that snaked throughout the aircraft. A single hit to these systems meant certain loss, but adding armor to protect the entire cooling system would have added over 200 pounds, negating all performance advantages. Schmood made a calculated decision: reinforce only the most critical cooling components and accept vulnerability elsewhere. Add minimal cockpit armor protecting the pilot from behind. Remove all other protective weight. This decision was based on emerging fighter doctrine. Schmood had been studying reports from the Battle of Britain, the Eastern Front, and Pacific combat. A pattern emerged. Fighters shot down in combat were almost always hit from behind or from the side rear quarter. Frontal attacks were rare. Attacks from directly abeam even rarer. Therefore, Schmood reasoned, armor should protect only against rear hemisphere threats. The pilot needed a steel plate behind his seat to stop bullets and shell fragments from astern. Nothing else was necessary. Every other pound of armor was wasted weight that reduced the very speed and agility that kept pilots alive. The transformation of the Mustang from capable fighter to war-winning weapon came from an unexpected source. In April 1942, Ronald Harker, a Rolls-Royce test pilot, flew a Mustang Mark I at the Royal Air Force facility at Duxford. He was stunned by the aircraft's handling and performance at low altitude. Immediately, he wrote to Rolls-Royce suggesting they mate the Mustang airframe with their Merlin 61 engine. The Merlin, powering Spitfires and Hurricanes, was a supercharged masterpiece that maintained power to 30,000 feet and beyond. If the Mustang's exceptional airframe could be combined with the Merlin's high-altitude performance, the result might be extraordinary. Rolls-Royce received permission to modify 5 Mustangs with Merlin engines. The first conversion flew on October 13, 1942. Test pilot Jeffrey de Havilland reported results that seemed too good to be true. Maximum speed 441 miles per hour at 25,000 feet. Climb rate 4,900 feet per minute. Service ceiling 42,000 feet. This aircraft is sensational. The performance gain was staggering. The Allison-powered Mustang achieved 390 miles per hour maximum speed. The Merlin Mustang reached 441 miles per hour, a 51 mile per hour increase. More importantly, it maintained this performance at altitudes where German fighters operated. But there was a weight problem. The Merlin 61 engine with its two-stage supercharger, weighed 200 pounds more than the Allison. The additional cooling requirements added another 80 pounds. Suddenly, the Mustang faced a 300-pound weight increase that threatened to negate all performance gains. North America's engineers faced their defining moment. Adding 300 pounds of engine while maintaining performance meant removing 300 pounds elsewhere. The solution was radical. Remove every ounce of non-essential weight. Armor was the obvious target. The production P-51B, the first American-built Merlin Mustang, carried exactly 65 pounds of armor. A single steel plate, 3/8 of an inch thick, protected the pilot's back. A bulletproof windscreen added another 8 pounds. That was all. By comparison, the Focke-Wulf 19008 carried 190 pounds of armor protecting pilot, fuel tanks, engine, and oil cooler. The Messerschmitt 109G6 carried 160 pounds. Even the American P-47 Thunderbolt, designed around radial engine reliability, carried over 220 pounds of protective armor. The Mustang designers had made a philosophical choice. In fighter combat, protection comes not from withstanding hits, but from avoiding them entirely. Speed, climb rate, and maneuverability kept pilots alive more effectively than steel plate. This philosophy extended to every aspect of the design. The fuel tanks, initially rubber-lined and self-sealing like all American fighters, were redesigned. The main fuselage tank, positioned behind the pilot, received minimal protection. Engineers calculated that any hit severe enough to penetrate this tank would likely kill the pilot regardless of armor. Therefore, armoring it heavily was wasted weight. Instead, they focused on fuel tank design that minimized fire risk. The tanks were shaped to maximize internal volume while minimizing surface area exposed to enemy fire. Baffles prevented fuel sloshing that could spread fires. But the tanks themselves remained relatively unprotected compared to other fighters. If you are learning about the incredible engineering decisions that transformed the P-51 Mustang into the deadliest fighter of World War II, make sure to subscribe to this channel and hit the notification bell so you never miss our deep dives into the technology and tactics that changed history. The first combat test of the Merlin Mustang came on December 1st, 1943. The 354th Fighter Group, equipped with P-51Bs, escorted bombers to Amiens, France. The mission was unremarkable, except for one fact. For the first time, American fighters had enough range to escort bombers deep into occupied Europe and still have fuel for combat. Major General James Doolittle, commanding the 8th Air Force, recognized the Mustang's potential immediately. In January 1944, he made a decision that would change the air war. All bomber escort duties would transition to Mustangs. The Thunderbolts and Lightnings, excellent aircraft in their own right, couldn't match the Mustang's combination of range, speed, and agility. But Doolittle went further. He changed the escort fighter's mission fundamentally. Previously, fighters were forbidden from leaving the bombers to chase German fighters. Doolittle reversed this policy. Your job is to destroy German fighters wherever you find them, in the air or on the ground. This change transformed the Mustang from defensive escort to offensive hunter, and the lack of heavy armor became an advantage rather than a liability. Mustang pilots could pursue German fighters aggressively, confident their speed and agility would keep them alive. The psychological impact on Luftwaffe pilots was immediate and devastating. For the first time since 1940, German fighters faced an opponent that could match them at every altitude, outrun them, outturn them, and most terrifyingly, follow them home to their bases. Hauptmann Heinz Knoke, the same pilot who first encountered Mustangs over Brunswick, wrote in his diary on March 20th, 1944, "The new American fighters are devils. They have range to escort bombers to Berlin. They have speed to catch us in dives. They have agility to fight us in turns. There is nowhere safe. They hunt us over our own airfields." German pilots quickly noticed something strange about the Mustang. It seemed to absorb damage that would down other fighters, yet simultaneously appeared more vulnerable than heavily armored German aircraft. The explanation lay in the Mustang's design philosophy. The liquid-cooled Merlin engine, while powerful, was vulnerable to coolant loss. A single hit to the cooling system meant engine failure within minutes. German pilots who managed to hit Mustangs in the vulnerable radiator or coolant lines watched them go down quickly. This created an impression of vulnerability. But the same Mustang could take multiple hits to the fuselage, wings, and tail and return home. The lack of armor meant bullets and shell fragments often passed completely through the aircraft without encountering anything critical. The aluminum structure, while thin, was remarkably damage-tolerant. Small holes in the skin barely affected aerodynamics. Oberleutnant Franz Stiegler, who would later gain fame for escorting a damaged B-17 to safety, described a March 1944 engagement. "I put perhaps 20 cannon shells and 100 machine gun rounds into a Mustang from astern. It was like shooting at a ghost. The rounds went through without visible effect. The pilot simply accelerated away. I could not follow." The reason for this survivability paradox was simple. The Mustang was designed around the principle that most combat damage wouldn't hit critical systems. The cockpit was small, the pilot positioned far forward. The engine and cooling system, while vulnerable, were compact targets. The fuel tanks, though unarmored, were positioned to minimize exposure. What made the difference was speed. A Mustang diving away at 440 miles per hour was nearly impossible to hit accurately. German pilots, trained for deflection shooting at slower targets, found the Mustang's speed made precise aim nearly impossible. By April 1944, Mustangs were ranging across Germany freely. The mission, on April 8th to Brunswick, involved 500 bombers escorted by 300 fighters, most of them Mustangs. Luftwaffe opposition was fierce. 90 German fighters rose to intercept. The ensuing battle demonstrated the Mustang's superiority conclusively. Of the 90 German fighters that attacked, 57 were destroyed. Most fell to Mustangs. American losses totaled 13 fighters, of which only 4 were Mustangs. The kill ratio of 14-1 was unprecedented. Lieutenant Colonel James Howard of the 354th Fighter Group described the mission in his after-action report. "Enemy fighters attacked the bomber formation from all directions. We engaged them throughout the target area. The Mustang's speed and climb allowed us to dictate engagement terms completely. We could attack or disengage at will. The Germans had no choice but to fight on our terms." This ability to control engagement parameters was the ultimate expression of the Mustang's design philosophy. Armor provides protection when you must absorb hits. Speed provides protection by ensuring you never get hit in the first place. The Mustang pilots, freed from the weight of heavy armor, possessed the speed to choose when and where to fight. The range advantage proved equally decisive. By fitting external drop tanks, Mustangs could escort bombers to any target in Germany and still have fuel for 30 minutes of combat. This extended range came partially from efficient aerodynamics but primarily from fuel capacity. The P-51D, the definitive Mustang variant, carried 269 gallons of internal fuel. With two 110-gallon drop tanks, total fuel capacity reached 489 gallons. This gave a combat radius of 750 miles, enough to reach Berlin from England and return. But carrying this much fuel created a problem. The main fuselage tank, positioned behind the pilot, held 85 gallons. When full, this tank shifted the aircraft's center of gravity dangerously aft. The Mustang became unstable and difficult to control. Pilots had to burn fuel from this tank first, accepting vulnerability during the climb to altitude. German pilots learned to attack Mustang formations during the climb out, when the fuselage tanks were full and the aircraft less maneuverable. But even with reduced agility, the Mustang's speed allowed pilots to dive away from danger, burning fuel rapidly to restore proper balance. The engineering team at North American continually refined the Mustang based on combat feedback. When pilots reported difficulty spotting enemy fighters, the P-51D introduced a bubble canopy providing 360-degree visibility. This modification required redesigning the entire rear fuselage, reducing its height by several inches. The bubble canopy eliminated a structural element that had provided some protection against attacks from above. But pilots overwhelmingly preferred the visibility advantage over the minimal protection lost. Once again, the philosophy proved correct. Seeing the enemy first was more valuable than armor. The armament evolved similarly. Early Mustangs carried 450 caliber machine guns with approximately 350 rounds per gun. Combat experience showed this was insufficient against heavily armored German fighters. The P-51D increased armament to 650 caliber Brownings with 400 rounds per gun in the inboard weapons and 270 rounds per gun in the outboard positions. This increased firepower added weight, approximately 150 pounds. To compensate, engineers removed more non-essential weight. Additional armor that had been added to early production Mustangs was deleted. The philosophy remained constant. Firepower and speed mattered more than protection. By June 1944 D-Day, the 8th Air Force fielded 14 Mustang fighter groups. On June 6th, Mustangs provided top cover for the invasion, flying 3,108 sorties. German air opposition was negligible. The Luftwaffe managed just 319 sorties across the entire day, and many of those aircraft never reached the invasion beaches, intercepted by Mustangs flying barrier patrols. The Mustang's impact extended beyond air superiority. Fitted with bombs or rockets, P-51s proved devastatingly effective ground attack aircraft. Their speed allowed them to strike German airfields, rail yards, and vehicle columns with near impunity. The same lack of armor that worried designers proved advantageous. Mustangs could dive at high speed, attack, and escape before anti-aircraft fire could track them. Colonel Hubert Zemke, one of the highest-scoring American aces with 17 3/4 victories, described the Mustang's ground attack capability in a post-war interview. The Mustang was ideal for strafing because it was fast enough to avoid most flak. We would dive at 450 miles per hour, fire a 2-second burst, and be out of range before the gunners reacted. The lack of belly armor was a vulnerability, but speed compensated. German records confirm the Mustang's ground attack effectiveness. Between January and May 1945, Mustangs destroyed over 4,000 locomotives, 9,000 trucks, and 1,000 armored vehicles on the ground. The Luftwaffe lost hundreds of aircraft destroyed at their airfields, unable to take off before Mustangs swept across their bases. The statistics of the air war tell an unambiguous story. In January 1944, before Mustangs arrived in force, the 8th Air Force lost 5.1% of bombers on each mission. Losses were unsustainable. In February 1944, the first full month of Mustang escort, bomber losses dropped to 3.5%. By May, they had fallen to 1.2%. Fighter losses showed even more dramatic improvement. In October 1943, the 8th Air Force lost 88 fighters in combat. In October 1944, with Mustangs dominating the force, losses fell to 43 fighters despite flying 3 times as many missions. The Mustang's kill-to-loss ratio exceeded 3-to-1 throughout 1944 and 1945. This compared favorably to the Thunderbolt's 2.2-to-1 and the Lightning's 1.7-to-1. The Mustang's combination of speed, range, and agility simply gave pilots better survival odds than heavy armor. German attempts to counter the Mustang proved ineffective. They tried fitting heavier guns to their fighters, but the increased weight further reduced performance. They experimented with jet fighters, but the Me-262's speed advantage only mattered in level flight. In turning combat, the Mustang's agility remained superior. They even captured intact Mustangs for evaluation. The report from Rechlin Test Center, dated November 1944, made sobering reading for German commanders. The P-51D Mustang represents the pinnacle of piston-engine fighter development. Its performance exceeds all German fighters in most categories. Range is triple our best aircraft. The minimal armor reduces weight, providing speed and climb advantages that German armor cannot compensate for. But the report concluded with a recommendation that was never implemented due to Germany's collapsing industry. Future German fighters should reduce armor significantly and prioritize speed and agility. The enemy has demonstrated that avoiding hits is superior to absorbing them. Subscribe now to continue learning about the incredible engineering and strategic decisions that shaped World War II, and make sure to hit the bell icon so you don't miss our upcoming videos on the technology that changed history. The human cost of the Mustang's design philosophy is impossible to calculate precisely. Undoubtedly, some pilots died who might have survived in more heavily armored aircraft. Hits to the cooling system that would have been absorbed by armor in a Thunderbolt proved fatal in Mustangs. But the broader statistics suggest the opposite conclusion. Mustang pilots had higher survival rates than pilots of any other American fighter in Europe. This wasn't despite the minimal armor, but because of it. The speed and agility that came from reduced weight kept more pilots alive than steel plate ever could. Lieutenant Colonel John C. Meyer, who scored 24 victories flying Mustangs, addressed this directly in a 1970 interview. "I never once wished for more armor in my Mustang. What I wanted was speed to run when necessary and agility to turn inside German fighters. The Mustang gave me both. Extra armor would have meant less speed and less agility. That would have gotten me killed." The post-war analysis by the United States Strategic Bombing Survey examined this question systematically. They compared loss rates of different fighter types adjusted for mission profiles and opposition intensity. Their conclusion vindicated North Americans' design philosophy completely. The P-51 Mustang's minimal armor approach proved correct. Loss rates per 1,000 sorties were lowest for Mustangs, despite flying the most dangerous missions deep into Germany. The weight saved by reducing armor translated into performance advantages that improved survival more than the armor would have. The Mustang's success influenced post-war fighter design globally. The Soviet Yakovlev fighters reduced armor significantly after studying captured Mustangs. The British eliminated most armor from their Meteor and Vampire jets. The United States designed the F-86 Sabre with minimal protection, prioritizing speed and agility. This philosophy persists today. Modern fighters carry essentially no armor. Instead, they rely on speed, stealth, electronic countermeasures, and agility to avoid being hit. The F-22 Raptor, the world's most advanced fighter, has zero armor plating. Its protection comes from supercruise speed, stealth characteristics, and superior maneuverability. The Mustang proved that armor in fighters was largely psychological. It made pilots feel safer without actually providing meaningful protection. What kept pilots alive was performance advantage, the ability to see first, shoot first, and if necessary, run faster than the enemy could chase. The numbers support this conclusion absolutely. Of 15,768 Mustangs built, approximately 2,300 were lost in combat. This represents a 14.7% combat loss rate over the entire war. By comparison, the heavily armored P-47 Thunderbolt had a 15.3% combat loss rate despite being primarily assigned to less dangerous missions. The German perspective on the Mustang evolved from dismissal to fear to grudging respect. Early Luftwaffe intelligence reports from February 1944 described the Mustang as a capable long-range fighter with moderate performance and light construction, making it vulnerable to battle damage. By August 1944, the assessment had changed dramatically. The P-51 Mustang is the most dangerous Allied fighter. Its combination of speed, range, and agility makes it superior to all German fighters at altitudes above 5,000 meters. Pilots should avoid engagement when outnumbered or low on fuel. By January 1945, German fighter doctrine had effectively surrendered. Mustang formations should only be engaged when possessing overwhelming numerical superiority and altitude advantage. Even under ideal conditions, expect heavy losses. General Adolf Galland, commander of German fighter forces, described the Mustang's impact in his post-war memoir. The arrival of long-range Mustang fighters over Germany spelled the end of the Luftwaffe as an effective fighting force. We could no longer defend our cities, our factories, or even our airfields. The Mustang pilots hunted us everywhere with an aggressiveness that our numerical and fuel shortages made impossible to counter. Perhaps the ultimate validation of North Americans' design philosophy came from an unexpected source. In April 1945, as Allied forces advanced into Germany, they captured Messerschmitt engineering documents. Among them was a proposal for a lightweight fighter to counter the Mustang threat. The proposed Me-109 K-14 would have reduced armor by 60% compared to existing models, saving 95 pounds. This weight saving would be invested in a more powerful engine and increased fuel capacity. The design philosophy was unmistakable. The Germans were trying to copy the Mustang's approach. The proposal included a remarkable admission. Combat analysis shows that armor provides minimal protection against cannon fire while significantly reducing performance. American fighters demonstrate that speed and agility provide superior protection. Future designs should prioritize performance over armor. This German proposal, discovered too late in the war to implement, represented the complete vindication of Edgar Schmude's revolutionary design philosophy. The enemy had been forced to acknowledge that the Americans had been right all along. The Mustang's operational record speaks for itself. In European theater operations, Mustangs were credited with 4,950 aerial victories, more than any other Allied fighter. This represented approximately 37% of all 8th Air Force aerial victories, despite Mustangs comprising only about 45% of fighter strength. More significantly, Mustangs accounted for over 4,000 ground victories, aircraft destroyed at their airfields or in flight at low altitude. This ground attack success came directly from the speed that minimal armor enabled. Mustangs could strike enemy airfields and escape before defenses could respond. The escort missions flown by Mustangs allowed the strategic bombing campaign to succeed. Between February and May 1944, Big Week and subsequent operations, Mustang escorts enabled bombers to destroy German aircraft production capacity. Over 25,000 German aircraft were destroyed or damaged, including approximately 40% destroyed in the factories before completion. Without Mustang escort, these missions would have been impossible. The bombers would have suffered prohibitive losses, as they had in October 1943 during the Schweinfurt raids. The Mustang's range and combat capability made strategic bombing viable. The personal stories of Mustang pilots reveal the aircraft's impact at the individual level. Major George Preddy scored 26.83 victories flying Mustangs before his death by friendly fire in December 1944. He described the aircraft as the perfect fighter, so responsive it feels like an extension of your own body. Colonel John Landers scored 14.5 victories in Mustangs after scoring 6 in Lightnings. He observed, "The Mustang let me fight the way I wanted to fight. Aggressive, fast, always dictating terms. In the Lightning, I was reactive. In the Mustang, I was predatory." Captain Chuck Yeager, who would later break the sound barrier, scored 11.5 of his 12.5 victories in Mustangs. He credited the aircraft's speed with saving his life after being shot down over France. After evading capture and returning to England, I flew Mustangs exclusively. The speed gave me confidence. I could always run if necessary. The Mustang's impact extended beyond statistics to fundamentally change fighter-pilot psychology. Previous generations of fighter pilots valued protection. They wanted armor, robust construction, and the ability to absorb damage. Mustang pilots valued performance. They wanted speed, climb, and agility to avoid damage entirely. This psychological shift represented a maturation of fighter doctrine. The recognition that, in aerial combat, the initiative belongs to the faster, more agile aircraft. Armor creates an illusion of safety while reducing the very performance that provides real safety. Modern fighter pilots understand this instinctively. No pilot today wishes their aircraft carried armor instead of thrust. The Mustang generation learned this lesson through experience and passed it forward to every fighter pilot who followed. The engineering achievement represented by the Mustang extended beyond the armor question to every aspect of the design. The laminar flow wing, designed to reduce drag through careful airfoil selection and smooth surface finish. The belly-mounted radiator scoop, positioned to recover some thrust from cooling airflow. The low-drag canopy, designed for minimal frontal area and smooth airflow. Each design decision prioritized performance over other considerations. The result was an aircraft that exceeded the sum of its parts, not because any single system was revolutionary, but because every system worked together toward the single goal of maximum performance. The Mustang cost $51,572 in 1944, roughly equivalent to $1 million today. This compared favorably to the Thunderbolt at $83,000 and the Lightning at $97,000. The simplified construction, partly enabled by minimal armor, made the Mustang relatively economical to produce. North American Aviation produced Mustangs at peak rate of 600 aircraft monthly. The total production reached 15,768 aircraft, making it one of the most produced American fighters. This production volume, combined with excellent performance, gave the Mustang unmatched impact on the air war. The maintenance requirements told another story favoring the minimal armor approach. Mustangs required fewer man-hours for repair than heavily armored Thunderbolts. Battle damage to unarmored structure was easier and faster to repair than damage to armored sections. This meant Mustangs spent less time in maintenance and more time in combat. The Mustang served beyond World War II in conflicts around the globe. It fought in Korea, where its long range and ground attack capability proved valuable despite the arrival of jets. Over 80 nations operated Mustangs at various times. The basic design proved so sound that some remained in military service into the 1980s. The racing community discovered the Mustang after the war. Stripped of unnecessary weight and modified for maximum speed, racing Mustangs reached over 500 miles per hour. This validated the design's potential when weight was minimized and power maximized. Today, approximately 150 Mustangs remain airworthy worldwide. They are valued by collectors and airshow performers for their combination of performance and classic aesthetics. The distinctive sound of the Merlin engine and the sleek profile remain instantly recognizable nearly 80 years after the design's creation. The legacy of North American aviation's decision to minimize armor extends far beyond the Mustang itself. It established the principle that in fighter design, performance trumps protection. This philosophy guided every successful fighter design since 1944. The lesson applies beyond aviation. In any competitive environment, agility and speed often provide better survival than heavy protection. This principle appears in business strategy, military doctrine, and evolutionary biology. The fastest predator catches prey more reliably than the most armored defender survives attack. The German failure to adopt this philosophy earlier cost them dearly. Their fighters, weighted down with armor that provided minimal real protection, couldn't match Mustang performance. By the time they recognized the error, industrial capacity no longer existed to implement corrections. The mathematics that drove Edgar Schmood's design decisions were simple but revolutionary. Every pound of armor removed allowed the Mustang to fly faster, climb higher, and range farther. These performance improvements kept pilots alive more effectively than the armor they replaced. The final accounting shows this clearly. Mustang pilots had the highest survival rate of any American fighter pilots in Europe. They scored the most aerial victories. They enabled the strategic bombing campaign that crippled German industry. They dominated German skies from early 1944 until war's end. All of this because American engineers made a choice that seemed dangerous at the time. They removed armor from their fighter and made it deadlier. They chose speed over protection, agility over strength, performance over perceived safety. Hermann Göring, commander of the Luftwaffe, reportedly said upon seeing Mustangs over Berlin in March 1944, "When I saw Mustangs over Berlin, I knew the jig was up." The aircraft he saw that day carried just 65 pounds of armor, but they carried something far more valuable: 750-mile range, 440-mile-per-hour speed, and the revolutionary philosophy that the best protection is speed. The P-51 Mustang proved that American engineers understood something their German counterparts missed. In the sky, as in nature, survival favors not the strongest or most heavily protected, but the fastest and most agile. By removing armor and adding performance, they created not just the best fighter of World War II, but a weapon that changed fighter design philosophy forever. The ghosts of 15,768 Mustangs still haunt the sky. Every modern fighter that prioritizes speed over armor, every pilot who trusts maneuverability more than protection, every engineer who removes weight to add performance, follows the path North American aviation pioneered in 1943. German pilots who faced Mustangs learned a harsh lesson. Armor might make you feel safe. Speed keeps you alive. The Americans understood this. They built an aircraft stripped of heavy protection, but endowed with performance that made it nearly untouchable. They removed armor from the P-51 Mustang and made it the deadliest fighter in the sky. That paradox, protection through performance rather than armor, remains the foundation of fighter design 8 decades later. The Mustang's legacy isn't just its combat record or its influence on post-war design. It's the fundamental philosophical shift it represents. The recognition that in aerial combat, the best defense isn't the strongest armor, but the ability to never get hit in the first place. The engineers who made that decision, who stripped away protective weight to maximize performance, changed warfare forever. Their revolutionary choice, born from calculation and validated through combat, proved that sometimes the path to survival runs directly through vulnerability. By making the Mustang lighter, they made it faster. By making it faster, they made it deadlier. By making it deadlier, they made it the weapon that won the air war over Europe. And it all began with the simple decision to remove the armor everyone else thought was essential.